All right, welcome to our last session of Geneva Health Forum 2024. Again, as I was saying before, we do have a dynamic program here full of pitching competitions, awards, and the last words from the key players of the Geneva Health Forum. And the first, actually, is to open the session. Is Sophia Ashab, President of the Geneva Health Forum and head of the WHO Collaborative Center in Mental Health. Welcome, Sophia. Please, a warm round of applause.
It's my very pleasure and honor to, on behalf of the steering committee of the Geneva Health Forum and its founding institutions, to welcome you all for this closing ceremony. This last session reflects very well the diversity of topics and backgrounds of speakers, stakeholders, and partners, including policymakers, public health professionals, healthcare workers, researchers, students, people with lived experiences, NGOs, industry, journalists, media technicians and producers, academic institutes delegates, international organizations, eminent journal editors, and many more pieces of the crucial ecosystem of Geneva Health Forum, connecting Geneva to all parts of the globe. It illustrates once again how science from field fills knowledge gaps and serves capacity building, policy making, and multilateral cooperation in critical issues to global health agenda, such as environment, migration, and communicable diseases, the three themes of this year's conference. I leave you in the good hands of Ariane and Emily for the first part of the ceremony, showcasing young and brilliant researchers with key interests and findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind you that you have headsets right at the end of this room, because our next session will be simultaneous in French and English. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my co-moderator for this particular session, Emily Reeves. She is the representative of the Swiss School of Public Health. You might have seen her standing outside alongside the beautiful posters that we have.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here representing the Swiss School of Public Health, which is the national coordinating body for public health sciences and research in Switzerland. So it was very nice to see so many faces by the booth, as you mentioned, Ariane. And it's still not too late. If you'd like to know more about the Swiss School of Public Health, then please come and find me at the booth. I'd be more than happy to welcome you there. A little bit about what we're going to see now, the Science Speed Talks. These were organized between the Swiss School of Public Health and the Geneva Health Forum. It is essentially a competition in which students from around the world who have submitted a poster to the Geneva Health Forum could present their research in just 3 minutes. This is very difficult to do, as you can imagine. They submitted this research through a video, which was then sent to a selection committee. Myself and other of my colleagues from the Swiss School of Public Health had the pleasure to be able to review these videos. We had 19, and we selected 4 finalists. And these 4 finalists went on to receive expert training from a specialist in communication, and the result of this training is what we're going to see today. So I'm very much staying tuned and looking forward to being able to hear these fantastic presentations, which I'm sure are to come.
Thank you, Emily. Now listen up, because you will all have a role to play in this competition. 4 doctoral candidates will have 3 minutes each to present their projects in the clearest and most compelling manner to you, the audience. You will all then vote for the presentation that you deem the most remarkable, and the winner will earn a prize of 1,000 Swiss francs. They will come here again, present themselves, present their projects in 3 minutes, and pay attention to this, because I may stop you if the time runs out. And then Emily will ask you a question or two, and we'll open the floor to the audience to ask just one more question. So after the session, we will be giving you a QR code so you can all vote for your favorite. Let's begin. Our first candidate is Ines Yebouet, from the Institut National Polytechnique, Félix, Houphouët, Boigny of the Côte d'Ivoire. Right now, you can present yourself.
I can present myself? Okay. Merci.
Thank you for giving me the floor. My name is Ahou, Cinthia Ines Yebouet. And even though I'm not in my home country, I would like to welcome you by saying Akuba. I have a master's in molecular biology, in which I was acquainted with the fascinating world of antibiotics. My work was involved identifying bacteria such as Escherichia coli, which had a certain resistance to antibiotics. I was fascinated by this work, and I decided to continue my PhD on this topic with vegetables as my matrices. When I'm not in my lab, I'm quite involved in organization, various aspects of organization in my country. I participated in the organization of the 6th Camas Scientific Day, the activities on 1/11, and doctoral activities. Just before coming here with my team, we participated in a U7 challenge, which consisted of presenting a project on the theme of the year. And of course, we won the first prize. And our project was to propose a solution for children who had learning delays, learning difficulties. This is my first project outside of my country, here in Geneva, and I'm delighted to be able to share this moment with you.
Thank you, Ines. Now, you will have 3 minutes to present your project, starting now.
Il était une fois un homme visionnaire.
Once there was a visionary man, Félix Houphouët Boigny, who, after having led his country to independence, he decided to make his town Yamoussoukro a symbol of prosperity. That led to the creation of Notre-Dame de la Paix, the largest basilica in the world, but also a fascinating system of lakes. However, these lakes became the scene of a less great reality: pollution, waste coming from human activities, and sewage. It all converges into this lake, which is the source of irrigation water for the crops around this lake. All the studies that were carried out came to the same conclusion. There was room for improvement in the quality of the lake. And in addition, they established a link between infectious diseases in the lake and the health of the inhabitants. Now, the need for antibiotics was becoming more and more urgent, but that lead had not been explored. Therefore, we thought it would be a good idea to contribute to the reduction of infectious diseases which might originate from that lake by carrying out more in-depth studies of pathogens which might be present in the Yamoussoukro lake and also in the market gardening crops around the lake. Our study revealed a grim and worrying reality. The artificial lake of Yamoussoukro and the crops around it are a reservoir of resistance to antibiotics. And the names of these organisms sound as a warning. High resistance to solicitine in lettuces, worrying resistance to for public health. So we thought when we realized all these resistances, we thought this was rather a lot and that it was time to react. It was time to react with determination in order to preserve the vision of Félix, Houphouët, Boigny, and to preserve the splendor of these lakes. We then characterized in genomic fashion the bacteria which we found in order to combat the transferability of this resistance. It's a race against the clock to preserve our health. Thank you for your attention. And don't forget to wash your vegetables and cook them properly before you eat them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ines. I'll let Emily ask one question and then the audience another question. So start thinking about it.
Thank you so much, Ines, for this wonderful talk. It's clear that you're interested in antibiotic resistance in the lakes, in the artificial lakes that you mentioned. I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about the artificial lakes in the rest of the country? What does that look like? In English?
Oh. Ok, dans le reste de la ville ou le... Ok, donc au niveau de mon...
At the level of my country, there are no other artificial lakes to my knowledge. It's only in Yamoussoukro that there is a system of lakes, 10 communicating lakes. The president built these lakes in such a way that at least 3 of the lakes go in front of his residence. And then he added caimans to some of the lakes because he liked this animal. So the lakes became touristic, a tourist attraction. And unfortunately, over the years, the pollution control system began to fail. So there is no longer any cleaning of the water. The SIAPL, which is our anti-pollution center, started to remove some pollution. The physical pollution, but we have not seen. There was only visual cleaning, not cleaning of the bacteria.
You will all be voting. Any doubts out there? Yes.
Merci Inès pour cette...
Thank you, Ines, for this extremely interesting presentation. I have a question. What form does this resistance to antibiotics take in Côte d'Ivoire? Is it greater in the lakes or on the coast? Is it really only in your country that there is this resistance, or is it elsewhere? Answer. Well, the resistance to antibiotics is all over the country. There is even a benchmark center which tries to form a directory of the different forms of resistance. In 2002, we had about 9% staphylococcus, and now we've gone up to 46% in 2018. So this resistance had increased, and this center is listing the data as we progress. Now, as far as malaria is concerned, malaria is an endemic disease in my country. So this resistance to malaria is much better listed than other forms of bacterial resistance. But this center is examining more and more the various parasites that could cause resistance.
Thank you. Thank you, Ines. Okay, our second candidate of the evening is Priyanka Gadav from the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, India. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Namaste and bonjour. I am Priyanka. I study PhD, or I'm a doctoral student at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, India. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for such a wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Eric. Then I would like to thank, somebody can put up my slide? Yes. Yeah, thanks. I'd like to thank my supervisor and my co-contributors, Gagan and Marian, also in the photographs. Lastly, I would like to thank my parents, coincidentally, both doctors, today witnessing their engineering kid present at the Geneva Health Forum. I was born and brought up in India, in the western parts of India. I started with mechanical engineering bachelor's there. Then I did my double master's in innovation design engineering at the Royal College of Art and Imperial College London. There I realized I really like interacting with people, and I'm fascinated by the way they interact. So to test this hypothesis, I moved to rural, remote South India, where I did not know the language. And believe me, that was the best decision of my whole life. Look how happy I am in the top corner photo. Then I worked with tribal residential schools, NGOs, entrepreneurs, frontline workers. Then I finally decided that child nutrition and public policy was a thing for me. I love spending time in the field at all levels, and much of my research is based on the lived experience and observations that I have on the field. And I was lucky to get opportunities to transfer these observations or these field experiences into actual policy and implementation. And you would see in my research that I'll present later, it's also an example of that. On personal interests, I absolutely love chai. Like, on the scale of, if you want to kidnap me, just tell me that there's chai in the van, and that's done. I'm learning classical music. I love reading, traveling, making new friends, long discussions, saris, and yes, languages. I'm on my 6th Indian language while miserably failing at French. Yeah, the R is difficult. And yeah, so lastly, while doing things that I really love and figuring out where my heart is, as such, it has been a crazy, crazy journey, but it has been a really enriching one. And GHF, the experience, the conversations that I've had here are now a beautiful part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So enriching to know much more about you.
Thank you.
All right. The session for your presentation starts now.
Now, think of those millions of poor, illiterate migrant mothers and their children who, with their families seeking work, find themselves in new, unfamiliar places in resource-poor settings in India. Neglecting their nutrition has severe issues. In the words of frontline workers, we make these children healthy, then they leave. Months later, they return severely malnourished, some nearly dying. Temporary migration is such a common phenomenon in India. What do you think is the number of studies on its impact on nutritional services? A scoping review suggests that there are literally none. So our ethnographic study looks at the barriers of the supposedly universal Integrated Child Development Services, or the ICTS program, in Maharashtra and Bihar, 2 states with really high migration. And we're looking at important services like supplementary nutrition, immunization, and health checkups. Based on thematic analysis of our observations and interviews, we have arrived at several themes. First is the lack of control. Temporary migrants and their movements are unpredictable. Many leave without informing, and contact is lost in most of the cases. So workers cannot inform them what they need or how do they access services at the destination. And here we see a missed technological opportunity, as currently there is no way to track or update migration status. However, technology alone cannot solve migration-related issues without considering mobility patterns and structural challenges. In some cases, we observe technology as hindrance. Then, at the destination, lack of documentation, temporary and domicile status, workers have very little incentive to include migrants. In their words, with the workload that we have, we are barely managing our own beneficiaries in our own communities. Then we have to stress that ICDS has a demand-based structure. That is, though the frontline helps locate beneficiaries, it is the responsibility of the beneficiaries to track and access services. And many women do not demand services because language barriers, gender ethnicity norms, then we have temporary status, restrictions by labor contractor. Many don't even feel they're eligible for services at their location or labor site. And long story short, many women and children return back severely malnourished and anemic. In conclusion, universal health and nutrition that we all keep talking about means that everyone, including migrant mothers and their children, gets equal access. And it needs systemic strengthening and sensitization at multiple levels. We have to recognize migrants as not just beneficiaries, but active participants of the policy processes themselves. And it requires a deeper understanding of their socio-political realities. And this was a humble attempt at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you so much. Now I'll let Emily ask her first question.
Thank you, Priyanka, for shedding light on such an important topic. You mentioned that there are obviously many, many difficult challenges here. What would be your, based on the research and what you've been describing, what would be your one policy recommendation for changing things the way that they are?
There are many, but I'd stick to the most important, is the effective service delivery or portability of services for migrants. And that can be achieved by a three-pronged approach. One is leveraging human-centered, and I underline bold, double quote, human-centered technology, capacity building, and sensitization, mostly of the front line, but also at all the levels of the administrative tier. And lastly, more awareness on the part of the beneficiaries about their entitlements.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. A question from the audience? No brave souls out there?
You are sure nobody wants to speak? Because I can speak
There's
again.
one over there.
Ah.
There's one hand.
I have so much to tell.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for your research. You mentioned that it's important to know the migration patterns, and I would like to know more about the population who migrate to India, where they come from, and you mentioned that they are temporary. Why temporary?
Thank you for the question, really important. So India is a really big country, and it is a diverse country in terms of we have like 28 different languages that we speak, and geography. And we do have a lot of inequality. So the migrants that I am talking of are temporary because in some regions which are poorer, which lack economic opportunities, the people there move. We generally call it distress-driven migration for seeking livelihoods in other parts of the country. And the population that I'm speaking about, we have data from the 2011 census, and you can just extrapolate it to have more number. But Bihar alone had almost 27 million people move out of the state for temporary migration, many of them women and children. So yeah, it's because of the social inequality, searching for livelihoods, that they have to migrate. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Up next, allow me to introduce you to Philippe Voruz from Geneva, Switzerland. He is going to present the economic burden of the post-COVID-19 state. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I will present in French. Croyez-moi,
it's more difficult to talk about myself than my research. I kind of had, well, I asked some people around me to describe, and we're going to see this on the slide. I asked my colleagues and my family, my kids, to tell me what they saw in the work that I did. And it's not without humor. You can see that I began by studying psychology and neurology. My colleagues described me after a day's work here in the train coming home. And here you can see the comments. I asked my two boys, 8 and 15, to describe their father. And their answer was, he studies something like the brain, but he likes to vacuum the house a lot. So that's the description of myself that I got from the family. I'm a good vacuumer in the house. And I have to thank my two sons who aren't here this evening for that, who gave me a little bit of insight, and they were happy that I showed their drawing. Now, my two worlds, family and my research. I attach a great deal of importance to the invisible handicaps, things that we don't see, neurological, but which have a heavy impact on people's lives.
We received, try to stay just
okay,
a
I will
little
stay
bit.
there, no problem.
For camera
like to move.
purposes. All right, so are you ready for your project presentation?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
This evening, I'm going to talk about the economic impact and the consequences of neuropsychological deficit estimation. We saw that environmental changes impacted different neurological pathologies, for example, Parkinson's. But one of the common characteristics were the cognitive symptoms, memory loss, difficulty to recognize emotions like sadness. Now, despite all of the progress of our knowledge here, there's still a lot of things we don't know. For example, the impact that this has on our overall health, and on the economic cost to each of our societies. We were able to evidence the fact that these cognitive disorders, including sickle cell anemia, was one of the best predictors than visible problems and handicaps. Let me go back a few years now to the COVID-19 epidemic. We had a project aimed at trying to measure the neurological, neuropsychological, olfactive, and psychiatric disorders that this provoked. And we were able to see that there was a persistent deficit in learning ability over the long term in terms of brain imagery and other tests, and this among different kinds of patients. The project also allowed us to see what the potential effect of these cognitive disorders were on society as a whole. We saw that in the United States, the estimated post-COVID cost would be $600 billion a year. So this is why this project, COVID-COG, decided to take a closer look at the direct and indirect impacts on the neurosystem, and also to see what kind of care needed to be afforded to these patients to attenuate the clinical effects as well as the long-term effects on society. To conclude, environmental change has created indirect impacts on the prevalence of these kinds of learning disorders, just like growing old and other factors. But it still hasn't been totally studied. We have been able to study the clinical impacts, and we know that this has an impact on society and is a huge economic burden to society. Thank you.
Voruz from the University of Geneva, Switzerland. Emily, any questions for him?
Sure, thank you so much, Philippe. From your research, is there a story, an example of what you could share about what it means to be living with the consequences of neuropsychological deficits?
Yes, sure. Actually, it's quite interesting because at the beginning of the project, we didn't expect to observe what we did observe. And actually, we had the opportunity to observe a specific profile of patients who actually experienced anosognosia. Anosognosia is actually a lack of awareness of your cognitive deficits. It's some patients that come to see us, they wanted to participate to the research, and when we did the anamnesis, they told us, oh yes, I do not have problems, everything is fine, no problem. And subjectively, we will say, okay, it's fine. But when we do our objective measures, psychometric measures of different cognitive function, we observe that he had deficits. And more interestingly, when we speak actually with their wife or members of the family, and also when we have some information from their jobs, we observe that deficits like programmation deficits or memory deficit had an impact on these patients in their life and also when they were working. For example, imagine you cannot shift from one task to another and you're working in a bank and you see all this information. You will make some errors, and more of, if you're not aware of your deficits, you will not see your difficulties, and this could have an impact by losing your job and having an impact also on your family and afterwards on our society, because we have to help these people, and also if we don't mitigate the symptoms, it can be a chronicization of the symptoms, and maybe in the future the insurance could take part and things like that. So there is plenty examples of different deficits who impact differently actually, but this one is an example that we observed actually in our projects.
Thank you so much.
You're
Philippe.
welcome.
Fantastic.
Any questions from the audience? Yes, we have one there.
Hi, I was wondering what you just explained, how can you be sure that these deficits are caused by COVID-19 and not by another infection of another virus, for example?
Thank you very much for your question. Actually, for the COVID Clock project, the methodology, we screened about 4,000 to 5,000 medical records of patients from the University Hospitals of Geneva. It was a big project. It involved more than 11 different departments of the University Hospitals of Geneva. And actually, we had our exclusion criteria were very important because all our patients didn't have any clinical history of neurological, psychiatric, developmental, oncological, or immunological history. And moreover, actually after looking at the clinical records, we also performed a telephone interview by screening the life. And if we did suspect, like 30 years ago, you had a mild TBI, like a traumatic brain injury, but it wasn't diagnosed, we say, no, you cannot come. We wanted to be sure that our patient didn't have any clinical history of other pathologies that could eventually explain actually these effects. And that's why actually I had 3 groups of patients. Patients who were in ECU with all these criteria, who were in just conventional hospitalization in patients who weren't hospitalized for SARS-CoV-2 infection. And actually, we observed deficits in 3 groups, even if you had more risk when you were hospitalized in conventional and ECU. But it shows that actually the effect goes above even an ECU hospitalization, because we also observed this in other group of patients. That's what was interesting, actually. But it was very tough to find these patients in the ECU group, actually.
Thank you so much, Philippe.
Thank you.
A round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Benedicta Apuamah from the Management Center Innsbruck in Nigeria. Oh, Austria. So sorry.
Hello, everyone. May I have my slide up? So my name is Benedicta Apuamah. I am originally Nigerian. I have a Bachelor of Pharmacy degree from Nigeria, and I recently completed my Master's in International Health and Social Management from the Management Center Innsbruck in Austria. So a couple of years ago, after I left School of Pharmacy, I realized that I had a passion for community development projects. So I had identified some challenges in my community, and I thought, why not contribute, to improve the lives of young girls in my community. So I started out with campaigns against teenage pregnancy, menstrual hygiene. As you can see, a bunch of girls holding up sanitary pads all around me. And I thought that I was, supporting young girls in my community. I'm just trying to help. But I didn't realize that what I was doing had global relevance until one campaign selected me to be one of their youth ambassadors in Nigeria. And a few months after, they asked me to represent them in a conference in Belgium. So you can see a picture of me saying, "Hi, Brussels." It was my first international trip ever. I was so excited. And all of this projects, with the one campaign and what I was doing, all culminated into the scholarship with which I studied at the MCI, the Ban Ki-moon Scholarship, because of my engagements with the UN SDGs. So you can see a picture of me at the MCI a few days after we arrived from Austria with my family. And you see a picture of my family with my son, Divine, and my husband, Frederick. That was taken 2 years ago at the Geneva Health Forum. And clearly, we have a new family addition, David. And my family is somewhere over there at the end. I've actually noticed a pattern that every time I come to the Geneva Health Forum, I come with an additional baby. I so much love the Geneva Health Forum, and I would really love to be invited next year or in 2 years. I just hope that that's just on a lighter side. Thank you, Geneva Health Forum, for having me and for having my family.
Thank you so much. All right, raise your hand, the family of Benedicta. Oh, you're over there. Thank you for joining us. Okay, now on to you. Your pitching time starts now.
Did you know that despite the available sexual reproductive healthcare services in Austria, refugee women were not adequately accessing them? I became curious as to why, and my curiosity led me to identify enabling and restricting factors that influence their decisions. What were my key findings? Gender and cultural sensitivity. By sexual reproductive healthcare services, I refer to pre- and postnatal care, family planning, abortion care, including female genital mutilation care services, to mention but a few. In some culture, sexual reproductive health is considered intimate and should not be discussed in public. Let me paint a scenario. Mrs. B had just had a baby in the refugee camp and required postnatal care. Usually, the camp coordinator or the social worker helps them book hospital appointments because of the presence of a language barrier. In this case, the camp coordinator, whom Mrs. B is most familiar with, is unavailable. Hence, the social worker was filling in for her. The social worker required some information from her to enable her book, the hospital appointment. Mrs. B would not oblige. Why? Because she didn't trust her well enough. The social worker goes the extra mile to call a friend of Mrs. B who spoke her local language fluently and spoke German. She still will not oblige. Okay, let me paint another scenario. Mrs. C had just booked an appointment with a gynecologist, including the services of a female translator. On arrival, a male translator shows up. That was the end of the appointment because she insisted on having a female translator. But it was, however, interesting to note that whenever a healthcare practitioner demonstrated cultural sensitivity in their delivery of sexual reproductive health, the gender did not matter anymore. For instance, the women were happily going to a male Arabic gynecologist because he spoke the language fluently and had an understanding of their culture. Cultural sensitivity in this context can simply mean arranging for translation services or using more subtle terms as against medical jargons. It is therefore highly recommended that in the delivery of sexual reproductive health, that cultural sensitivity be adopted, because sexual reproductive health is a human right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benedicta. Emily, on to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear there what you were saying about this cultural sensitivity. Could you give us, I don't know, an insight into what you've maybe found surprising or interesting about the respondents that you had? So with regard to what you were talking about there.
Okay, so there was this particular respondent who, because of the trauma from her migration history, had developed a phobia for the male gender. And she had to be moved from the normal refugee camp with men and women to another camp, with women and children. Although eventually, when I asked further, because a part of the interview included, wanting to know if they are assigned to a gynecologist or they have to see a different one every other day. It was interesting to see that this particular respondent was actually attached to a female gynecologist. So I can't help but imagine what it would have been like if she had a male gynecologist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, opening the floor for questions. We just need one question.
Please ask me.
There's one over there.
Thank you, Benedicta. Your work is just amazing. Thank you for introducing that to us. Can you give us a bit of insight on who are those women in Austria, from where they are coming from, how they reach this place, and what is maybe the way to reach Austria, please?
Thank you very much. So I had 9 respondents who were refugee women, and the other 2 respondents were the camp coordinator and the social worker. So for the refugee women, I had a woman from Nigeria, Ghana. A greater percentage of them were from Somali. We had someone from Afghanistan and Syria. And I listened to some of the stories, on how they moved from their countries of origin, particularly some of the women from Somalia. They told me they actually came by foot from Somali to Greece and from Greece to Austria. So their stories are really wonderful.
Really touching, indeed. Thank you so much, Benedicta.
Thank you.
Okay, time has come to vote. We will be showing a QR code in here and a little summary for you. We had Ines Yebouet from Côte d'Ivoire. She spoke about antibiotic resistance bacteria recovered from Yamoussoukro man-made lake and surrounding lettuce. The second candidate, we had Priyanka Gadave from India. She spoke about navigating welfare, a study on the implications of temporary migration on nutrition services in India. The third, we had Philippe Voruz from Geneva, Switzerland. The economic burden of the post-COVID-19 state, underestimating COVID deficit. This was an overview of the COVID co-project. And finally, you just heard from Benedicta Apuamah from Austria. She's from Nigeria, but currently in Austria. She spoke about acceptability of sexual reproductive health services amongst refugee women in Tyrol, Austria. Again, this is the last call for you to vote. Please scan your QR code and do vote for your favorite.